I knew the serum had failed when the alphas stopped smelling like iron and started smelling like me. The warehouse they called a club had once been an airplane hangar. Tonight it was a rib cage. Neon ribs, metal ribs, human ribs. The crowd pressed in like lungs around a single beating heart. The ring, sweat and cheap cologne clashed with the sweet sour tang of spilled beer, but beneath it all ran the metallic thread I'd learned to follow since I started hunting the people who hunted us. Iron, blood, and the barely there citrus-clean echo of my suppressor serum vaporizing off my skin. I kept my chin tucked, my guard tight. The guy across from me was an alpha with shoulders like a loading dock and a tattoo of a wolf that looked like it regretted its life choices. He grinned in that practiced way alphas do when they want you to see their teeth, but not the uncertainty behind them. The crowd howled for him. For me, they chanted the name the house had given me, Ghost. Fitting. I was an Omega who didn't register. A broken smoke alarm in a burning building. Keep it messy, Kira had said in my ear 3 hours ago, when she patched the mic into the tape hidden in my hand wraps. Messy looks real. And don't bleed. I'll do my best, I'd told her, knowing I wouldn't. A bell clanged. It sounded like a dropped pan in a cheap kitchen. Doc shoulders threw the first punch, a hook built for flattening refrigerators. It kissed my guard and pushed me back into the ropes. The rope burned my spine through the thin shirt they'd handed me in the locker room, some brand with a skull on it trying too hard. I let the force spin me, slipped to his right, sent a jab into the seam under his ribs. He grunted, the crowd hissed. He smelled like old pennies and energy drink, which meant my serum still held, mostly. Ghost, make him bleed. Someone yelled. Not tonight, I muttered, moving. I wasn't here to win. I was here to look legitimate long enough to get camera footage of the handlers. The payments, the back hallway, where the post-fight offers got made. Omegas recruited under the pretense of sponsorship. Collars disguised as contracts. I'd spent a year mapping their ecosystem. Tonight, I needed proof the courts wouldn't ignore. The alpha lunged. I let him tag me, light, so the house would be satisfied and the crowd would believe in physics again. His glove skimmed my cheekbone. A flash of white, a bell inside my head. Warmth trickled down my face. The sweet, unmistakable copper of my blood hit air. The room changed. It wasn't the crowd. It wasn't the music. It was pressure, barometric, sudden, like the door to a freezer cracking open. The air pulled taut, threads tightening across the skin on my forearms. It curled the baby hairs at the nape of my neck. Instinct shot through me so clean it almost felt like relief. I didn't look toward the entrance. I didn't need to. He had walked in, and the atmosphere made room around him the way water shapes itself around a blade. The alpha in front of me smirked, didn't notice. The house ref did. His gaze flicked past my shoulder, then snapped back like he'd touched a live wire. He swallowed. I wiped my cheek on my shoulder, blinked sweat and pink from my eye. The suppression serum should have been saturating my scent receptors, and yet there was that whisper, threading, into the back of my palate, cedar after rain, cold stone, a note like heat on metal before it glows. Not my smell, him. I hate words like aura. They sound like candles and apologies. But standing there, I felt it. A settled discipline, a winter-still lake with something alive and enormous under the ice. Doc's shoulders charged, and I let him push me back again, because I needed another angle. The house camera cut across on its little rail, blink red, and caught the handler. Near the far door, the man in a suit who controlled which fighters graduated to assets. I angled my shoulder to keep him in frame, gave the camera a long glance like I was checking the clock. Then I pivoted out, walked Doc into the corner, peck to keep him honest. And the bell finally saved us both from the pretense of sport. I went to my corner, which was a folding chair and a bucket. The cut man dabbed at my cheek with something that stung like old regret. You're leaking, he said. I'm dramatic, I said. He laughed, a dry rasp. Don't get dramatic on my floor. House takes a cut. The handler moved toward the back corridor. The camera tracked him. I breathed through my mouth like always. And then my serum faltered again. One heartbeat, two, and the scent under everything rose. Mine. Not strong. Not a banner. A red thread no one should follow unless they'd been taught to ignore the noise of the world. Footsteps on concrete behind the ropes. Not heavy. Certain. The ref looked again and wished he hadn't. A pocket of silence opened, the way silence does when a predator doesn't need to roar. I knew better than to meet the gaze of an alpha like that, but I'd always been a poor student around authority. I looked. He stood just inside the shadow of the loading bay, where the neon died and only the emergency light nicked the edge of his cheekbone. Tall, built like a boundary you didn't cross, hair close-cropped, eyes the color of storm steel. Clean jacket, no insignia. Hands bare. And he was looking at me like he'd already diagrammed my options and found them inadequate. "Back up," the cut man said, because my chair had drifted toward the ropes without me noticing. The bell rang again. Doc came forward with relief blooming in his shoulders. He liked it better when we weren't thinking. I met him, dipped, went under, math like water. We traded enough to wash the suspicion off the night. The crowd got what it came for. I let him clip me one more time so I could spit blood, theatrical, and the camera could catch the handler accepting a slim envelope near the red exit. Then Doc got bored and careless. I put a dot on his chin to remind him pride is a luxury product. He sat down without asking the canvas for permission. Chalk up a win for Ghost. The crowd remembered to love me. I didn't put my hands up. I stepped through the ropes, dropped to the concrete, and walked along the outside of the ring like a man heading for a drink instead of the back hallway. The emergency light hummed overhead. The alpha from the loading bay moved with me, parallel, never closing the gap. I could feel his attention like a thumb pressing at the soft place under my jaw. The handler slipped through the door marked employees only in a font that was more threat than policy. I palmed the pass Kira had cooked for me, thick cardstock, wrong barcode that read exactly right, and pushed the door. The corridor smelled like bleach and paper. Fluorescence hit old tile. Far end, an office. I caught the edge of two men talking. The handler's voice, "He'll do. He's neutral." Neutral meant unclaimed, uncollared, sellable. I took one breath, and the serum broke like a surface tension under a dropped coin. My scent lifted. Warm skin, red tea, a pulse of something green that Kira always said was stupidly hopeful. I felt it leave me, felt it hit the humid corridor air, and bloom. Footsteps behind me stopped. Then they didn't. They came on, not fast, because fast is a promise you only make when you want witnesses. "Don't," I told myself. "Don't turn around. Don't." I turned. He was closer now, features carved out by the bad light into clean planes. The kind of face that doesn't beg for your trust but looks offended when you don't give it. He took in my cheek, the blood drying at my hairline, the way my shoulders had gone set. He inhaled once, lightly, like a critic sampling a wine he didn't order. His mouth tilted. "You think I can't smell you, even through this stink?" His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. A dozen little vertebrae in the corridor, guards, fixers, the ref pretending to look for a mop, reacted the way prey does when lightning speaks before thunder. I smiled, because I have always preferred to die on a line I wrote. "You forgot who's hunter and who's bait." Something flickered in his eyes. Recognition? Interest? Annoyance at my literary choices? He stepped closer, and I felt the temperature change between us, the way you do standing at the edge of a bonfire. Not hot, but inevitable. He didn't touch me. He didn't need to. His scent moved first, a quiet cloak slipping over the edge of mine, lowering it, calming it. Not suppression so much as gravity. My pulse, traitor that it is, found a steadier rhythm. I hated that. I liked that. "Walk away," he said softly, as if the corridor were a chapel. "Or run." "I can do both." "I'm busy," I said, angling a shoulder to show him the office door. "And you're in my shot." "You're in mine," he said. The handler glanced up through the office window and saw us. He looked at me, then at the man at my back, misread the arrangement, and chose cowardice over curiosity. He turned to the safe, opened it, and pulled out a thin black binder. Contracts. A leash made out of language. I wore a wire. I needed 20 more seconds of audio and 6 of video. I needed the exit. I needed not to react to the way the alpha's breath touched the top of my ear when he leaned in, not a threat, an assessment. "You're bleeding," he said, almost conversational, "and your serum is failing." "I'm aware." His gaze flicked to the end of the corridor, to the office, back to me. You have choices, not good ones. I make those for a living. Then here's one more. His voice went lower. If I take you in, the leak stops. If I don't, I hunt alone. I don't like hunting alone. Sounds like a you problem. The binder thumped onto a desk. Money changed hands. The camera in my wrap blinked its exhausted little heart. I stepped back. He shifted with me, staying at the same distance, refusing to cut off my angles. A professional courtesy or a game. I couldn't tell which. Ghost. Someone shouted behind us. Interview. My cue. I smiled as if the world were a joke I'd heard before, ducked under his arm. He didn't stop me, which was interesting, and slid through the door to the main floor. The noise swallowed me. Heat rose in a wave. A woman in a red dress pressed a microphone into my mouth like a kiss. I said something witty about gratitude and cardio. Then, I moved. Exits are a habit, not a place. I took the catwalk above the bathrooms, the service stair, the side door that sticks unless you kick it. Night punched me in the lungs with wet air and the perfume of rain moving in from the river. I tasted it, and under it, the faint lift of cedar and steel. I didn't run until I heard the door behind me sigh shut. The alley was a funnel toward the street. I didn't take it. I took the fence, boots scraping chain link, dropped hard enough on the far side to wake the cut on my cheek. Blood bloomed again, bright as a flare. I wiped it with the back of my hand and saw the smear glow like a signal in the sodium. Streetlight, a thin red line on concrete. A thread I hadn't meant to lay down. I left it anyway. Some hunts, you don't win by disappearing. Some you win by teaching your predator how to follow the wrong trail until he finds you where you want him. Behind me, the door creaked open. Air shifted. That low-pressure feeling again, precise as a hand on the back of my neck, not pushing, guiding. Go on then, I told the night, and smiled because I couldn't help it. Let's see who forgets who first. Rain made the city honest for about 5 minutes at a time. It washed the alleys, polished the neon, turned last night's lies into slick reflections you could step around if you watched your feet. I kept my head down and my hood up, hand pressed to the butterfly bandage I'd slapped on my cheek in the club's bathroom. The cut ticked under my fingers, a small metronome counting out the distance from what I'd just done to what I still had to do. Kira's building was a 6-story brick holdover wedged between a massage place that definitely wasn't, and a locksmith that definitely was. I took the back stairs, 3 flights, paused to listen for neighbors, then knocked the knock that meant don't throw chemicals at the door. Bolts clicked. A chain slid. The door opened a cautious inch, then swung wide. Inside, Kira said, and don't drip on my calibrations. Her lab apartment smelled like coffee, ethanol, and that crisp note of ozone that means science is about to happen whether you're ready or not. Every flat surface had lost the fight against glassware, flasks, pipettes, a centrifuge whirring like a tiny jet engine. Cables braided across the floor to a bank of monitors that showed data scrolling in polite green lines. Her white coat wore its history openly. Coffee rings, scorch marks, a smear of violet dye on the sleeve. Her hair was cropped close enough to make a point, and her expression said the point would win. She looked at my face. You bled. You told me not to. Did you try not doing it? I tried being dramatic instead. Mixed results. She took my chin in gloved fingers and tilted my head toward the desk lamp. The light bit at my eyes. She made a small noise that meant not fatal, and another that meant annoyed. Anyway, then cleaned around the butterfly with quick, efficient passes. The sting cleared the fog in my head. Did you get anything? She asked. Handler took an envelope. Contracts are in a black binder. Office safe's cheap. The camera got it. I tapped the coil of tape secreted beneath my hand wrap. Audio, too. Good. She released my chin, turned to her screens, and a different kind of focus locked in. Sit. No. There. Not on the notes. Not on the wires. Not. Okay, I'm moving the wires. I took the stool by the window, where she kept nothing alive because plants feared her schedule. Rain braided the glass. A billboard across the street threw red light through the blinds, slicing the room into neat panels of danger. Kira's eyes cut to the small of my back. Where's the serum patch? I pulled up my shirt. The edge of the transdermal patch had curled, adhesive, tired from sweat and heat. Kira hissed softly and motioned me closer. She peeled it off with a tenderness that felt like sarcasm, flicked it into a biohazard bin, and replaced it with a fresh square that chilled my skin. "Your adrenaline ate it," she said. "Again, then my adrenaline should pay for dinner. It will. In the currency of sleep, which you won't get." She paused, gaze scanning my face like a barcode. Something else happened. I didn't answer immediately. The rain filled the room for me, soft percussion on glass and metal. I could have lied. I didn't. "He walked in," I said. Her mouth thinned. The hunter, alpha, late 30s, built like a doorframe, eyes like winter steel. He didn't flash a badge. Didn't have to. The room made space. "And he scented you." I nodded once. Kira's thoughts swore 4 different ways behind her eyes. She didn't voice them. She went to the whiteboard and drew a hard line under the word protocol. "We're done. We pull out. You disappear for 6 months. I bury the research and switch buildings." "No." She turned. "I'm not taking a vote. This is the vote," I said, and held up the coil of tape. "We're closer than we've ever been. They're selling profiles, Key. Not names, not faces, profiles. The handlers don't need to own a person to sell them. They just need a scent signature and a contract written in friendly fonts. We have proof. We finish the map and hand the whole hive to the DA. And the DA will pat your brave little head and call the clans for permission." She shot back. "Meanwhile, the hunter with eyes like winter steel will put you in a bag labeled, 'Problem solved.' You are the leak, Nick. They issued a directive. ClanNet chirped an hour ago, eliminate the source." I looked down at my palms. My knuckles had scuffed open during the fight. The scabs tugged when I flexed. "So, I should stop breathing. You should stop being interesting to predators," she said, and then softer, because Kira's voice had more gears than she let most people see. "You should stop before you're not here to be angry at me." Her screen pinged. She pivoted back, fingers flying. A live feed bloomed, the club's service corridor from a camera that was not strictly legal. The handler again, walking a man in a silver mask through the office. The binder on the desk, open like a sleeping mouth. Kira tagged the timestamp. Her jaw set. 5 more days, I said. We shut it down. 2, she said. And only because I can't physically tie you to a chair without voiding our friendship agreement. Something in my chest laughed, then ached. Since when do we have an agreement? Since you started bringing me stolen data, and I started pretending it annoyed me. She glanced at the patch on my back. The formula needs a tweak. Your endocrine spikes are higher than baseline. So my body is extroverted. Fix it. She snorted. Projecting. That's cute. On her leftmost monitor, a dossier sat open where she'd parked it earlier. Clean font. Cold facts. A thumbnail photo angled down and to the left as if refusing to pose. Ryse, Clan Adjunct Operations. Missions listed in a polite column. Retrieval, retrieval, suppression, retrieval. The dates formed a metronome of obedience. The commendations were short and to the point. I looked harder. There, 3 years ago, a notation flagged, special dispensation granted. Purpose, redacted. What did he get dispensation for? I asked. Kira followed my gaze. Unknown. And before you ask, yes, I tried. It's sealed like a saint's tomb. Maybe he asked to hunt alone, I said, thinking of that corridor and the way he shaped the air. Said he didn't like the noise. Maybe, she said, or maybe he asked to break rules to save someone, which would make him unpredictable. The word made my skin remember cold hands and sirens. My breath hitched on its own, traitor reflex. The room dimmed along the edges and brightened at the core, the way memories do when they want to be now. It was a different night, a different hallway. Brick, sweat. A door that wouldn't give. We'd cut power to the caged lights, and the dark smelled like bleach and fear. The Omega was small and too quiet, his wrists marked, his scent thin with dehydration. I had his elbow in my hand, the handler's keys biting crescents into my palm. We're leaving, I'd said, and believed it. The second team was late. The first team was already gone. A van idled in the alley, exhaust painting the air gray. Footsteps came quick and wrong. I turned, pushed the kid toward the exit, and then there was a pop like a knuckle cracking in the wet thunk of impact. He folded in the doorway, his blood writing a single blunt sentence on the floor. I learned a new shade of copper that night, one I couldn't wash out of. Anything. Not clothes, not sleep, not the part of me that keeps accounts. Kira's hand touched my forearm, quick and precise, the way you touch a live wire to test if it still bites. "Come back," she said. I did, with a breath that tasted like rain. "I'm here." Her jaw worked once. "Don't do that alone again." "I wasn't alone," I said. "You were here." "Congratulations," she said dryly. "You discovered the point of friendship." We watched the handler sign one more contract that had nothing to do with help. Kira copied the feed twice, then again for luck. She muted the sound and turned to me. 2 days, she repeated. "I'll rework the patch to handle your stupid adrenal spikes. You will not, under any circumstance, go back to the ring without me in your ear and 3 exits planned." 4, I said. "Fine. 4. And you sleep here?" "Spare room," she said, and pointed with the force of a small god. "Bedding is clean. Towels are not pink anymore." I won the war with the die. I wanted to argue because rituals keep fear from deciding the conversation, but my bones had the heavy feeling of a storm warning, and my eyelids had their own agenda. "Okay," I said. She nodded, satisfied in the way of people who pretend not to care and care anyway. "Brush your teeth, and if you bleed again, I'm labeling the jar." I showered fast. City water, the temperature you get, and not the one you request, then stood by the window, with a towel around my neck, and watched the street, while Kira pretended not to watch me watch the street. Rain had softened to a skin. Cars hissed by. The locksmith rolled down his security grate, with a sound like a chain being reasonable. Across the way, the billboard blinked from lipstick to luxury watch, to a PSA about staying hydrated. I cracked the window an inch, because the room needed fresh air, and because I wanted to know if the night still smelled like cedar and steel. It did. I saw him before I admitted I was looking. He stood on the sidewalk below, not under a street lamp, not in the open, just far enough back that the building's shadow clipped his shoulders. He wasn't hiding. He was measuring. The hunter's stillness looked like patience, but I understood it now as choice. His face tipped up once, not to the window but to the rain, as if scent traveled better when you let it. Kira glanced at me, followed my line. "Is that?" "Yes." She swore silently with her eyebrows. "Get down." I didn't. I watched him breathe. He took in the air the way a man reads a familiar sentence written in a different font. Then he turned, not quickly, and walked away, like he'd decided to be polite about it. Kira let out a breath with edges. "He found you." "I left a trail," I said. "You always do." The room seemed smaller once he was gone, the way a song feels shorter when you know the last line. I shut the window. The glass held the city at bay, and the red slice of the billboard fell across my hands. My world, which had been a map, narrowed to a corridor with a door at the end. I had chosen the door. Now something on the other side was choosing me back. The motel sat just outside the city's radius of care, a strip of low buildings stitched together by old neon and bad intentions. I chose it for the same reason anyone chose it. No questions, no cameras, no one sober enough to notice who followed who inside. The room smelled like bleach, dust, and the faint ghost of cigarettes smoked by someone already dead. A single yellow bulb hummed overhead. The wallpaper had lost the will to live sometime around 2008. Perfect. I left the door cracked. The plan was stupid, but it had a rhythm. Make noise. Leave a breadcrumb. Let the hunter take the bait. Kira would scream if she knew, which was why I hadn't told her. Outside, a car passed. Tires whispered through puddles. Then came that drop in air pressure again, like gravity choosing sides. He was here. I didn't have to see him. My pulse did the math first, the way it always does when instinct recognizes something older than thought. I caught his reflection in the cracked mirror, tall frame, damp hair combed, back, the kind of stillness that belonged to predators and statues. "Could have knocked," I said, keeping my voice flat. "You left the door open," he answered. His tone was quieter than I remembered, low, deliberate, carrying the calm of someone who could end a room if he wanted to. I was being polite. He stepped in. The door shut behind him with the sound of commitment. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. The only sound was the ceiling fan trying to die gracefully. I reached for the side table, pretending to adjust my phone, thumb brushing the silent panic key Kira had built into the case. His gaze tracked the motion. "No transmitters," he said. "Signals jammed." Of course it was. I smiled anyway. "You came prepared." "I always do." His eyes moved over the room once, door, window, me, and came to rest like a pin pushed into a map. "Why here?" "Neutral ground," I said. "Cheap bed, bad lighting. Thought it might match your personality." That earned a flicker at the corner of his mouth. "Not quite amusement, not yet." "Your friend, Kira," he said. "She's been modifying the formula. So, you've been watching her too." He didn't deny it. "You shouldn't have gone back to the club. The clans think the leak is a ghost. They're half right." He took a step forward. I mirrored him, sideways, putting the bed between us. The mattress dipped with age. My pulse stuttered once, then steadied out of spite. "You could have turned me in by now," I said. "Could have," he agreed. "So why haven't you?" "Still deciding what you are. Try human." His gaze didn't waver. Not the word they used. I hated how calm he sounded, how unhurried. It wasn't arrogance. It was control so deep it looked like serenity. "I'll make this simple," I said. "You kill me, you lose the trail. Without it, you'll never find who's selling your tech." "I don't need the trail," he said, closing the distance with one slow step. "Then you're just another weapon without a target." That stopped him. Barely. His expression didn't change, but something behind it did. A crack in the ice. "I already am," he said. "But you—" He exhaled, slow, through his nose. "You smell like a mistake I've made before." The words shouldn't have hit like that. The air felt smaller. My body didn't know whether to fight or freeze, so it split the difference. Tension coiled under my skin, waiting for a command. He reached up suddenly, too fast for me to flinch, and caught my wrist. My pulse jumped under his thumb. He didn't squeeze, just held it, eyes flicking to the smear of dried blood near my knuckle. "Stop running," he said. "Stop chasing. Not how I'm built. Then you're defective." That earned a real smile, brief, crooked, human. "So are you." I tried to pull back. He didn't let go. A heartbeat later, we were moving, his grip sliding, my shoulder twisting. The kind of dance you only learn from too many close calls. I aimed a knee toward his ribs, but he caught it, momentum turning us both sideways. The bed broke our fall. The springs screamed. He landed above me, weight braced, not crushing. His breath brushed my temple, warm, steady, infuriatingly calm. The smell of him filled the air, clean leather, rain, something darker underneath. Every nerve in my body misread it as safety. "Let go," I said. "I should." "But you won't." "No." "Why?" He hesitated. That alone scared me more than the hold. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost its edges. "Because the order said eliminate," he murmured, "and my instincts say protect. I'm trying to remember which of us I trust less." I stared up at him. For a second, just one, the monster in the stories looked like a man trying to stay loyal to his own ruin. "Trust neither," I said. "It saves time." He studied me as if the answer might be written somewhere in my skin. Then, slowly, his hand released my wrist. We stayed like that, close enough that our breaths tangled, for one long, reckless beat. Then he pushed himself back, stood, and looked down at me like he was memorizing a crime scene. "You're not afraid," he said. "Wrong," I replied. "I'm terrified. I'm just good at multitasking." He almost laughed. The sound died before it could escape. "You should leave town." "Can't. Won't." "Same thing." He sighed, the kind of sound that belonged to someone older than his body. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small metal disc, the kind worn by clan hunters. The symbol on it caught the light, a stylized wolf curled into itself, etched with old precision. He set it on the motel's chipped nightstand. The metal rang once, clear and final. "If you decide to run," he said, "leave this behind. Someone will know what it means. And if I don't, then find me." The words shouldn't have felt like a promise. He turned to leave, pausing at the door. "You're bleeding again," he said without looking back. "Story of my life." Then maybe it's time for a new chapter. The door opened. The smell of rain followed him out, damp and electric. When the latch clicked shut, I let the silence flood back in. My hands were shaking, which was either adrenaline or something worse. On the nightstand, the metal disc gleamed like a coin flipped by fate and left midair. I sat up slowly, staring at it. The room still smelled of him, cool steel and cedar. I should have hated it. I didn't. Instead, I realized something worse. For the first time since this started, I wasn't sure who was hunting who anymore. The elevator down was a coffin with opinions. Red bulbs pulsed above the door as if the building had a heartbeat and poor circulation. When it opened, heat licked my face, perfume, cigar smoke, and the buttery breath of money. The hallway curved like a whisper toward a set of double doors guarded by two men in suits that fit like consequences. I wore the house uniform for new talent. Black shirt, sleeves pushed, knuckles taped fresh over healing scabs. A handler's hand rode my shoulder with the casual pressure of ownership. Eyes down, he murmured, and pushed me into the room. The auction had no stage in all theater. Velvet drapes drank the light. Paper lanterns in the shape of red moons floated under a ceiling ribbed with gold. The guests were masked: fox, crane, boar, blank porcelain, eyes glinting through cutouts. A string quartet sawed delicately at something expensive in the corner, while waiters ferried drinks the color of sin. It would have been beautiful if beauty wasn't working as cover for a crime. No lots stood under spotlights. Instead, a wall of screens unscrolled columns of data, in soft, clean fonts: pH, cortisol, baselines, hormone ratios, and then, what mattered, volatile signature arrays, scent profiles, not people, not names. The suggestion of a person distilled to a code that could be ordered like a cigar you intended to own. Lot 12, said the man on the raised dais at the room's throat, voice silk-wrapped steel. Neutral born, uncollared, high adherence to handling, a low murmur, currency fluency. The masked fox raised 2 fingers, then 3. The crane tilted its head, amused. A woman in a mirrored mask tapped her glass like a tiny bell. My handler squeezed my shoulder in time with the bids, a metronome of restraint. Behave, he breathed. You'll graduate to private showings. On the dais, the auctioneer smiled. He was handsome the way fire is, bright, too close, impossible not to watch. Black hair in a precise cut, a mouth made to sell you ideas that would eat your house. He didn't read prices off cards like a lesser god would. He read the room's appetite and fed it. Lot 12 at, he named a number with more zeros than mercy. Sold. Polite gloved applause, as if salvation had just been allocated responsibly. They rolled through more lots. A new screen slid up, pale blue, annotations tidy. At the bottom, temperament, compliant under pressure. Conditioning, moderate. The room made an approving sound. I tasted bile. Who are they? I asked under my breath, not to be answered, because the question was an insult. I knew who. I just wanted to hear the word person out loud. They are assets, the handler said. Soon. So are you. Soon, I echoed, and smiled at the nearest camera. Kira would be getting everything. The display, the bidding signs, the auctioneer's face. When he said words like neutral, as if they meant freedom instead of open season. Halfway through the program, the doors at the back opened, and a group of latecomers dripped in, laughter like coins falling. Among them walked a man with no mask. He wore the suit that money thinks it deserves, and the posture that made room before it asked. He wasn't looking around, and still he saw everything. Ryse. He should have been anonymous, he wasn't. Alphas turned to register him, and then forgot they had. That was a skill, and not all of it was learned. He didn't look at me straight on. He took the perimeter, as if he were reading exits to calm his hands. He stopped near a pillar, angle perfect to see the screens and the auctioneer's mouth at once. Next lot, the auctioneer said, and the screens changed again. Shadows of science behind a moral blank. He raised his glass. Friends, freedom is a discipline. We have built a place where freedom is practiced, priced, and protected. We rescue those the state forgets, and give them names with teeth. A ripple of gooseflesh walked my spine the wrong direction. Rescue, names, teeth. He beckoned a server, accepted a drink he didn't taste. We are a family, he continued, sounding almost gentle. "We are a choice." Behind me, someone chuckled. A buyer in a bull mask murmured, "Choice is why I pay." The bids went up. When the handler shifted his weight, I took the chance and slipped left, catching the eye of a second camera nestled under a paper moon. I stood where its lens would frame me as background to the auctioneer's speech, and blinked slow, twice, the signal Kira had trained me into. "We have him, we have this." 2 rows over, a man in a porcelain mask tilted his head, sniffed. Alphas in groups smell like storms trying to decide where to break. It was starting, attention sliding in my direction as if tugged on a thread. The patch on my back worked, mostly, but my blood was still my blood, and the room was warm, and fear has a bouquet. Ryse turned his face slightly toward me, as if to watch the auctioneer from a different angle. He inhaled once the way he had in the corridor, evaluative, spare, and something in the set of his mouth altered. Not surprise. Calculation. The porcelain mask made a small pivot. The bull leaned toward its date. My handler's fingers tightened. "Private showing," he whispered, steering me toward a side door. This was the part where the fiction ended. The corridor behind the auction floor was the thesis, beige paint and bolt locks, the smell of sanitizer that has seen things. The handler pushed me ahead, his confidence up a gear. Then someone stepped into the hall from the other side, 2 doors down, a body filling space with ease because he'd practiced on harder rooms. "Apologies," Ryse said mildly, and the handler stopped because his bones recognized a tone bred for compliance. "I'm late to the bidding. I'll need a review." "We're mid-cycle," the handler said, half disdain, half the opposite. "Book an appointment." Ryse smiled like weather improving. He produced a metal card, slid it between 2 fingers with lazy precision. The handler saw the emblem, Clan Adjunct Authorization, and forgot how to be clever. "Of course," he said, shifting balm into his voice. "This way." He moved without touching me for the first time all night. We ended in a narrow side chamber dressed up as luxury, gold foil mirror, 2 soft chair, thin rug that wanted you to think it was thick. The air conditioning breathed a little colder. The door shut. We were alone. "You again," I said. "You," he said back, as if categorizing an animal in a field guide. "Mid-cycle review?" I asked. "That a thing?" "It is now." He crossed the room and leaned a hip against the cheap credenza, posture textbook casual. His scent rolled ahead of him in a subtle wave, dry cedar, rain pulled through stone. It wove into the room's perfume and cut it cleaner. I hated the way my shoulders released a degree of tension I hadn't authorized. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "Then it's a good thing I am," I said. "Everyone will make better choices." I moved toward the door because comedy relies on timing. He was there first without looking like he'd moved at all. "Try again," he said. "Try me," I said, because my mouth is more loyal to humor than survival. He breathed once, exasperation neatly folded. Footsteps passed in the corridor. Voices thinned, thickened, receded. For a few heartbeats we stood with a single door between us, and a floor full of predators considering the price of mercy. In the main room, the auctioneer lifted his glass again. "We do not buy people," he said smoothly. Voice piped in through some discreet speaker. "We purchase responsibilities." "Translation," I said. "Leashes." Ryse's jaw flicked. "Leashes have 2 ends. So you leash back?" "If I have to." I hated that answer because it was honest. He stepped closer then, 1 measured pace, and the change was instant. His scent reached me, settled over my shoulders like a coat in winter. Not heavy, just present. He didn't touch me. He didn't need to. The shield was chemical and old as law. Outside, someone slowed by our door, sniffed, and moved on with a small, derisive huff, the way a wolf dismisses a rival's marked boundary. I swallowed. "What are you doing?" "Keeping you from getting sold by your outline," he said. "Stand still." I stood still because the lizard in my brain prioritized continuing my existence. He stepped that last fraction closer until the air between us felt negotiated. My heart mutinied, then made peace with its captor because bodies are weak where safety is concerned. "Breathe," he said. "I am. Less like a man drowning. Maybe remove your hand from the water first." He hadn't touched me. It felt like he had. On the speaker, the auctioneer's voice warmed. We provide sanctuary from chaos, he said. We give purpose to the nameless. Those who buy names, I said, too quiet for the speaker and exactly loud enough for him. Ryse's eyes were very, very steady. Those who sell them, he corrected, and that was the first time I heard something like contempt in him. My handler would be missing me by now. The mass crowd would be drunker, bolder, hungrier. A private showing might turn into a private transfer. I needed faces, contracts, timestamps, proof. I have to go back out, I said. You don't. I do. He didn't argue. He changed tactics, strategic retreat disguised as consent. Then walk past me, he said. Let me hold the air for you. It should have sounded like ownership. It didn't. It sounded like a terrible plan I trusted. I moved. He didn't touch me, but his presence navigated obstacles I couldn't see. The door opened, noise swelled, cool scent met hot. We stepped into the corridor and then into red light. A couple glanced over, nostrils flaring, ready to evaluate the new toy, and then looked away, uninterested, as if what they smelled was not for sale. On the dais, the auctioneer announced a special lot, a profile flagged with a halo of gold. The crowd leaned in, conspiracies turning to appetite. I caught the screen, the angle, the auctioneer's lifted glass. Kira's little camera under the paper moon blinked like an alibi. Ryse leaned just close enough that the hair at my nape felt noticed. You keep climbing into the animal's mouth, he murmured. You said it yourself, I murmured back. You'll leash if you have to. Don't ask me to prove it, he said, and I heard the edge of something tired. I turned my head the smallest fraction. His eyes met mine for one raw second, all the choreography forgotten. He was a problem set I couldn't solve and didn't want to hand back. Zveri kot chesny liudi, I said before I could stop myself. The Russian rose like a reflex from someplace old. He didn't blink. Beasts are at least honest, he translated softly, perfect, and that was a revelation I didn't need tonight. Exactly, I said. We made it to a side exit. The night rushed our faces, cool and wet, washing the room's sugar from my mouth. I exhaled, like it belonged to me again. He stepped back a half pace, taking his scent with him like a canopy being folded away. The absence felt ridiculous. Go home, he said. You hate my home. I hate this more. Noted. He looked at me a long second, the way men look at road signs when they already know the turn. Next time you do this, he said, don't do it alone. With you? With someone who knows how to get you out. Same difference. He didn't smile. Not to me. Then he turned toward the dark, and I watched his shoulders until the rain took them. For the first time since I'd started this case, the night didn't smell like the aftermath of lies. It smelled like wet stone, clean cedar, and something that pretended to be safety so well I almost believed it. Ryse's safe place looked like a wound that had decided to heal politely. The warehouse was old brick and older grudges, ribbed with steel beams and crossed by dust-bright windows. He'd carved an apartment into one corner with walls that didn't reach. The ceiling, as if he wanted privacy without pretending to deserve it. A single lamp threw a pool of amber over a table scarred by other lives. The rest was shadow and utility, metal shelving, a cot with hospital. Corners, a kitchenette that believed in kettles and nothing else. He let me in, didn't offer a drink, didn't check the street twice. That told me he was either confident or tired of pretending he wasn't prey too. You picked a charming mausoleum, I said, because humor keeps me from asking for mercy. It's clean, he said. It's mine. Clean was true. Cedar and cool stone again, threaded through with machine oil and laundry soap that had no patience for fragrance. My shoulders let go of half an inch they didn't know they were holding. I hated that his air had become the overflow valve for my system. Why am I here? I asked, leaning a hip against the table. Because if I told you in a hallway, he said, you'd argue. And if I told you in public, you'd pretend not to hear. He shrugged off his jacket and folded it with the kind of care that usually belongs to keeping promises. Underneath, a dark shirt, sleeves pushed, forearms marked with the pale clean lines of old injuries. Not trophies. Instructions he'd outlived. Sit, he said. I sat, more to prove I could disobey later. He didn't pace. He stood the way men stand when they've been taught their movement can frighten the wrong audience. When he spoke, His voice was the same steady bass that had turned corridors into decisions, but the edges were softer, like he'd sanded them down for this room alone. "The serum," he said, not quite looking at me. "You think I want it because it makes you harder to find, don't you? I want it because it gave someone a chance I couldn't buy any other way." The warehouse made its old noises, the tick of metal cooling, the slow breath of air returning from the door. He watched the lamps pool, as if the story lived there and he could handle it by illumination alone. 3 years ago, he said, Omega, small, too quiet for his age. A clan decided he was a loss they could monetize. They filed the forms. The state signed what it always signs when presented with a stamp. I was given the retrieval. I was supposed to bring him back. I knew this shape. My ribs knew it. You didn't? He shook his head once. He'd have vanished into their care. Reconditioning. Discipline. A man can break any law if he uses the right nouns. Past tense, I said, gently. You keep using it, because that phase of my life ended that night. He touched his wrist as if the memory had been cuffed there. I took him out. I hid him where hiding still means something, under the names of people the world forgets. But he was scent-marked, from the facility, from fear. They'd find him. They always do. So you needed to erase his outline, I said, mouth dry. He nodded. I knew of a compound in development, Kira's ghost work before she learned to lock her windows. I took the formula and brought it to someone who could finish it, fast. On the street we were losing hours. You stole it, I said. Because accuracy matters less than honesty and more than justification. I did. The admission landed without dramatics. I gave him a trial dose. It stripped the signature enough to get him past the dogs. And after? A long breath. After, I did what I was trained to do better than anything else. I closed the file. He glanced at me then, the look of a man confessing to the quiet part. On myself. It took me a second to understand. Then it hit. Slow and cold. You used it too. I'd spent too long being what the orders required, he said. I knew what happens when scent lingers where a clan wants leverage. I couldn't keep going if every room smelled like someone I'd failed to protect. I needed to forget the part that would get him found. What part was that? I asked, even though my gut already knew. Me, he said simply. The part of me that remembered him by smell. The lamp hummed. I heard the warehouse swallow and settle around us, the way old buildings do when they accept a new weight in their bones. You erased yourself, I said. To keep him safe. I erased the scent map that would lead me back to him, he corrected. It's not precise. Serum memory works like frost. It lingers at edges, leaves imprints. You never erase enough. And yet, I said, thinking of the corridor, of how he'd breathed me like, a question he'd asked before. You still find what you shouldn't. He didn't deny it. Instinct is not a file, he said. You can redact a name. You can't unteach a body that learned survival by smell. Before I could answer, the outer door clicked open, soft and careful. The way people enter houses where they're still invited, but no longer expected. Ryse didn't reach for a weapon. He didn't move at all. He just said, "Hi," into the lamp circle. And something in his tone rearranged the shadows. The man who stepped in wore a coat meant to be practical, and a face that had practiced kindness in the mirror to keep it from looking like resignation. He was Omega by the shape of my nerves, low, constant hum, and by the way his gaze did 3 things at once, counted exits, counted costs, counted me. Jonah, Ryse said. The name fit him. He shut the door with a thumb and took us in. The cot, the lamp, the table, me. A small smile bent his mouth where it wanted to flatten. You move the shelf, he said to Ryse, and his voice had that soft grit of someone who smokes only when he's already decided not to. Looks better, easier, Ryse said. Jonah stepped closer, and the light introduced his scars. Not many. Enough. The thin white crescent under his eye where old glass had signed its name. The healed crosshatch at his collarbone that said restraints once didn't take a hint. My throat tightened in a reflex I haven't managed to train out, grief for strangers, because the category is never really that. He set a brown paper bag on the table. Brought dinner, he said. To me, with more manners than suspicion. Hi, I said, and stood so he could decide whether to take the chair or take offense. He did neither. He looked at me the way you look at a house you used to live in and moved out of before the roof caved. Friend? He asked, Ryse. Complication, I said. Both, Ryse said. The two of them had a geometry I recognized. Distance disciplined into kindness, history combed flat so it wouldn't snarl in public. Jonah's gaze parked on my face, then slid away like he didn't trust his eyes to be discreet. You smell like rain, he said, almost to himself, and then the slightest flinch, as if he'd betrayed something private. Sorry, I said, because the apology is universal when we bleed into rooms we didn't buy. I can stand downwind. No, he said quickly, then gentled it. You're fine. He looked at Ryse again then, and for a heartbeat the practiced calm cracked. The line of his mouth trembled, grief trying the door. You should have told me you were bringing someone here. I wasn't, Ryse said. He insisted. Of course he did, Jonah said, and a small, wry smile repaired itself. He studied me, then turned the knife on himself. And you let him? The jealousy wasn't loud. It was a quiet competence that asked for receipts. Under it, a pain that hadn't chosen theatrics. He loved Ryse, still, probably always, in the way people love the ones who cut the wire and then taught them how to walk without looking back. I'm not here to replace anyone, I said. I'm here because I'm stupid. That tracks, Jonah said, but the edges softened. He opened the bag and set out 2 containers. I brought soup, because some of us eat. Ryse forgets. Ryse took the hint and the container both. He didn't sit. He leaned against the table, that posture again, staying tall around smaller bodies without being a wall. We're shutting down an auction, I said, because deflection and truth sometimes share a hallway. They sell profiles like they're hygiene products. We have enough to make a DA blush. Blush won't help, Jonah said, neat with his spoon. They need to choke. We're working on it, I said. He nodded, not impressed, not dismissive. Be careful, he told Ryse, not me. Ryse's mouth softened. Always. Lie, my bones said. He's saying it to keep you from worrying. Lie, Jonah's eyes answered, and forgave him anyway. The lamplight made a small cathedral of the table. In that gold, secrets looked smaller, people looked more like themselves. Jonah ate 3 spoons to prove a point. Ryse drank water like a man reprieved. I sat with my hands open on my knees, trying not to catalog the way my body had started to file Ryse under safe. That was when the conversation twisted into the truth. Jonah set his spoon down, precise as a surgeon. So, he said to me, tone light enough to throw, are you the leak? Yes, I said, because I'm bad at lying to people who remind me of rooms I want to keep, and I plan to make it worth the mess. Good, he said, and then, too quickly to catch, how long? I blinked. How long what? Until you ask him to choose. The room learned to be quiet. Ryse went still in that way of his. My pulse climbed the last flight of stairs and found itself on a roof with no railing. I'm not, I started. You are, Jonah said, kind even when he was cutting. Because that's the math. Orders or instinct. He'll pick the second and bleed for it, and then you'll have to decide whether you wanted that or just wanted to be wanted. I should have bristled. I should have postured. Instead, I looked at Ryse, whose gaze had gone somewhere soft and dangerous, memory lanes with no speed limit. I thought of the corridor, his scent over mine, purpose folding around impulse until they looked like the same thing. You used the serum to forget, I said quietly, turning back to him because Jonah wasn't my enemy, only my mirror. Not to save yourself from him, to save him from you. His mouth tightened. He nodded once. The ache that lived behind my ribs stood up. You erased a map so you wouldn't become the threat you were assigned to be. He didn't ask how I knew. He just watched me, lamplighting my conclusions like a priest blessing secular wine. I took a breath I felt in my back. You wiped memory to not feel. I tried to forget to survive. We're both chemical reactions, Ryse. He held my gaze with a steadiness that wasn't dominance. It was consent to stay. Then let's see what happens if we mix. The words landed somewhere below my lungs and above my sense. Jonah flinched the smallest degree. He recovered like a professional. He looked down at his hands and smoothed the spoon into the exact place a spoon belongs. I should go, he said, efficient, kind. Inventory in the morning. Stay, Ryse said. It was reflex. It was wrong. Jonah smiled with an old sadness. I moved out, remember? He stood, slipped his coat on with motions that remembered other versions of this room. At the door, he turned back to me. Don't ask him to be less than what he is, he said. Even if it scares you. It does, I said. I won't. He looked at Ryse a last time, catalogued what he needed to survive the night, then left as gently as he'd arrived. The door clicked. The warehouse exhaled. Ryse watched the wood a beat longer, then folded the takeout lids closed. He put them in the sink and ran water like absolution. We should plan, he said without turning around. We will, I said. I stood, the chair legs scratching the concrete like a small animal waking. The room had become a confession I couldn't breathe inside. I pulled the clan token from my pocket, the small metal disc he'd left in a motel that still smelled like us not admitting anything, and set it down in the lamp circle on the table. Metal rang once, silver against wood, and the sound drew his eyes the way a bell draws the faithful. If you decide to run, he'd told me, leave it. I didn't know if I was running. I only knew I couldn't carry both the hunt and the history tonight. Good night, I said. His throat worked. He nodded. I left, and the warehouse door shut behind me with the clean click of a decision deferred. Outside, the city's breath hit my face, the familiar cocktail of rain, metal, and distant sugar. Somewhere under it, the ghost of cedar held, thin as thread. I walked into it anyway, because sometimes the only way to keep from drowning is to let the tide tell you who you are, then argue with it in the morning. Kira's lab looked like it had argued with a thunderstorm and won on points. The centrifuge hummed under her palm, monitors built neon constellations out of numbers. A smell, like clean hospitals and burned coffee braided with rain coming in through the cracked window. I stood with my hands on the back of a chair and tried not to pace holes into her rug. Hold still, she said without looking up. You make the air untidy. I'm vibrating, I said. It's different. She slid a vial from the spinner with the reverence of a priest palming a relic and fed a droplet into the mouth of a sensor that blinked awake like a polite eye. On screen, spectra rose, peaks and valleys singing the chemical's narrow song. A second window snapped open and overlaid the first. The two didn't match. Kira went very quiet. Not the mad scientist quiet she performs when she wants applause, the kind that starts in the face and moves down the spine. What? I asked. She tapped a key. Two peaks misaligned by a hair's breadth glowed soft red. That, she said. The suppressor's core is correct, but there's a modifier grafted at the tail, a proprietary stabilizer, not mine, not from any public research. It's clan-made, and not amateur hour. I felt my jaw lock. Meaning someone with access to clan pharmacology refined the dose-response curve. She peeled off her gloves, stuffed them into a bin like she wanted them to feel punished. It sticks longer, saturates faster, and, she toggled a graph, it fragilizes memory around scent associations more than we thought. Cleaner erasure, fewer edges. My tongue went dry. Could they trace users with it? Kira's eyes sharpened behind the glass. If you're asking whether they salted the compound with a beacon, no. I'd see it. This is engineering for mercy, not a leash. She glanced at me. Which makes it worse, if you're trying to fit it into a convenient villain story. The door opened. Ryse stepped in like he'd been carved out of the storm. He looked like last night had rinsed him and left the clean lines. Shirt dark, jacket darker, hair damp at the temples. The room's pressure adjusted without asking permission. Kira didn't jump. She never does. She just arched a brow to say you're late to your own intervention. We were talking about mercy, she said. Or accuracy masquerading as cruelty. Your pick. He didn't waste time on greetings. He came to the table, read the screens, and stood a fraction smaller, which is how men like him apologize. You found the stabilizer. Kira crossed her arms. We did. House brand clan sauce. Want to tell the class why it's inside my work? Ryse kept his gaze on the graph. Because 3 years ago, I brought your work to someone who could finish it quickly. Because a boy needed to stop smelling like a target. Because I could either violate a rule or watch him be processed into grief. You violated several, Kira said, voice flat as a wall. Yes. He finally looked at her. No plea, no pose, just the fact of himself. It was me. I didn't realize I'd braced until something released in my shoulders and hurt worse for it. Some piece of me had been waiting for a speech about orders or a gentle lie built for our benefit. He chose the cut that would scar true. Kira's mouth pressed thin. She paced once, twice, short rips of energy across the tile. "Congratulations," she said. "You improved it. You also ensured the clans could iterate the thing that lets people stay unowned. Do you want a cookie or a court-martial?" "Neither," he said. "Just an end that isn't a circle." The monitors kept humming. Outside, sirens stitched the rain to the avenue. I blew out a breath and stepped in before they drew blood with their vocabulary. "We can argue ethics later. We have an auction house dressed as a sanctuary and a lab somewhere turning profiles into products. Shut that down. The supply chain breaks." We hit the head. Kira's eyes cut to me. "You're suggesting we go to their lab?" "I'm suggesting we end this tonight," I said. "You have the location?" She made a face that said, "Please insult me less elegantly." Packet traces from their bidding software pinged a subnet near the freight yards. The kind of address you get when a slumlord rents to a startup with no website. Ryse had already picked up his jacket. "We go in fast." "Fast gets you dead," Kira said. "Smart gets you home." His mouth tilted. "I'll try smart." "Try obedient," she snapped, and shoved a satchel at me. "Spare patches, flash charges, earwigs. I am not losing either of you to a cause with a PR department." We moved. Steps to the car. Tires on rain. The freight yard at night, stacked metal corridors and sodium lamps buzzing like insects with degrees. Kira parked 2 blocks out and locked the world with her eyes. "If we're not out in 20, she said, "I make a phone call that ruins reputations and dinner parties for a decade." "Make it at 15, I said. 10, Ryse said. And that unholy compromise was the last smile we shared for a while. The lab squatted in a warehouse that had a birth certificate and a fake ID. The front door said office. We took a side entrance that said lawsuit. Inside, concrete and light. A corridor's worth of mild beige. Then glass, a suite with benches, fume hoods, a wall of cold storage, and the hum that lives in rooms where people ask chemistry to answer moral questions. It would have been almost impressive if it weren't a crime scene waiting for a headline. Kira moved like a woman at work and war. She slid to a terminal. Her fingers burned a sigil into the keyboard that only read as keystrokes because the universe is generous. "I'm in," she said, not smug, busy. "Inventory, orders, anonymized client lists, with the kind of anonymization a DA can promenade through in heels. Give me 90 seconds. "We have 30, Ryse said. He'd already read angles, doors, vents, the hollow places where ambush weaves. He lifted a chin. Up. The catwalk above the lab gave us a balcony on their sin. From here you could see the shape of the operation. Culture flasks like slim cities. A printer extruding labels. That would travel farther than any of us ever had. A whiteboard where someone had written family with a heart. Kira swore under her breath in a language that can't be written. Only implied. "I'll plant a wiper in their system. Soft brick. Looks like power loss. When they boot, there'll be a cathedral of empty boxes." The floor below breathed. Air shift. The whisper of shoes. Ryse's hand found my shoulder without touching it. He shook his head once. "Not ours." "Visitors?" I mouthed. "Hosts," he mouthed back. And then the trap clanged shut. Lights flared to surgery. Doors hissed as locks took themselves seriously. A voice, whiskey silk and close enough to kiss, came over the intercom. "Welcome back," the auctioneer said, pleasant as a maitre d'. "Tours this way." Kira didn't run. She pulled a fire alarm that wasn't one, and every panel in the room glanced down and died in a cascade. "There," she said. "We're ghosts. Except for the parts with guns." The first guard came through a side door, with the eyes of a man who likes his job too much. Ryse met him in the threshold and turned him into a remembrance. Quiet, efficient, nothing left to practice. 2 more followed, then 2 behind them. Bullets ricocheted sleet along the catwalk rail. "Down." I yelled, and we fell into cover as glass exploded where our faces had been. Kira flung a flash. The world became magnesium. Sound contracted to a white pinprick, and then came back wrong. We ran. The catwalk dumped into a stairwell that smelled like mop bucket and fear. At the bottom, a corridor. At the end, a door that should have been an exit and wasn't. Left, Ryse called, and I trusted his body's map more than the building's lies. We skated into a loading bay with the bones of trucks and the ghosts of shipments. A shot rang, true, solid, the kind that makes a narrative jump tracks. Ryse jerked, surprised, then staggered behind a pillar, hand at his side. Blood welled between his fingers, dark, fast. Time did a thing it does when it wants to be art. It widened around a single point and let meaning walk through. I was there before sense caught up. "Talk to me," I said, and tore the kit open. Through and through, he said, clipped, too close to the edge to brag. "Pressure," I said. My hands listened to his body the way you listen to a radio under static. I pressed gauze. He pressed back to help me help him. We both pretended this was procedure, not an intimacy. Boots hammered in the hall. Kira took a knee and put 3 neat lines of warning into a door frame. "They'll flank," she said. "We need an exit, not marked exit." Another shot, chipped concrete. Ryse's breath hitched and found its discipline again. He looked at me, not at the blood, and smiled like a crime he intended to keep. "If I don't make it out," he said, "clean, not tragic, find the trail. It will smell like me." "Shut up," I said, and felt my throat rawing. "You don't get a monologue." "It's not for me," he murmured. "It's for you." I swore with affection, because I didn't have time to be eloquent. Then I did the stupid thing that made sense. I slid 2 fingers through the blood blooming, under my palm, and smeared a line along the loading bay floor, quick, thin, deliberate. Kira's head snapped. "Nick, breadcrumbs," I said. "For allies, not for them." I popped a flash to our right and ran us left. The guards bit the bait. Their shots chased the wrong light. We ducked behind pallets wrapped in plastic that smelled like fresh sin. Ryse's weight pressed into my shoulder, solid, heavy, alive. 2 more turns, Kira said, moving like geometry. Then a chain gate, then the alley. I can loop the camera for 7 seconds. After that, we star in their footage. We moved. Gunfire stitched the air behind us. The loading dock door sulked halfway open, jammed by rust and irony. Kira hit the override. The motor whined like a complaint that wanted a manager. "Go," she snapped. "You're not staying," I said. She rolled her eyes in the key of tender. I said, "Loop, not martyr." The gate rattled up enough to make bad choices possible. I got Ryse under it. Kira slid after, grabbed the chain, and yanked it back down. The night slammed into us. Wet, slick, honest. The yard's lamps painted everything sodium and sorrow. Behind us, voices. Ahead, rain and the kind of darkness that could be mistaken for privacy. We ran crooked to break sight lines. My lungs burned. Ryse's breath stayed measured by force of will and better training. Blood soaked my fingers, hot then warm. I hated how my body kept inventory. His weight, his heat, the steadiness that won't quit. We made the corner. I planted him against brick that had seen worse and will again. Kira took point, pistol down but ready, eyes 2 steps ahead of all of us. "You can stop," I told him. "Just for a second." He shook his head once. "Not while you're moving. I'm moving because you are. We're both moving because you won't stop." Kira muttered and handed me a band that bit like fire when I cinched it over the dressing. "That will hold until a room with better lighting." He closed his eyes briefly, nodded gratitude he didn't know how to say without uniforms. Rain flattened our hair and made everything smell like metal and a clean chance. Sirens again. Closer now. Not for us yet. For someone else's catastrophe. The city has range. "We need to split," Kira said. "If they follow scent, one of you is a beacon, and the other is me." "I'll draw," I said, already seeing the path. North alley, train fence, the market. Ryse's hand found my wrist. His fingers were tacky with his own blood. He didn't squeeze. He didn't have to. "You're not bait. I am what works." He started to say no. Then he looked at my face and remembered what happens when you close a door. On a person like me, we find a window and take the wall as souvenir. "Go," he said. conceding to the plan the way a tide concedes to gravity, with dignity. I'll follow your trail when I can stand up without disgracing my ancestors. Don't you dare die, I said, and then, because we had already crossed too many lines to pretend we weren't writing new ones, I leaned in, close enough that my words could be mistaken for contact. Find me. I always do, he said, and the rain underlined it. I ran. I didn't try to vanish. I painted the night with a thread thin as breath, blood, and the smallest lift. Of my scent, a red trace a body built like his could parse out of a choir. I cut corners that made sense to me, and to no one else, left marks where only someone who had stood too long in too many corridors would think to look. A handprint on wet brick, a smear at ankle height on the rail where a gate sticks, a palm pressed to the back of a sign that says no parking and means nothing. Behind me, the lab's alarms found their voice and screamed to impress the stars. Ahead, the city opened sick and beautiful. My legs burned. My chest burned. Some old part of me remembered another alley and another boy and the precise angle at which a body falls when a second team is late. I made myself a promise that tasted like iron. Not tonight. I rounded the last turn into the market where tarps snap and people mind their business like a religion. I slid into shadow and became a stack of crates with a heartbeat. The rain softened to a conversation. The night brought me a gift in the end, a breath on the wind that didn't belong to buses or fear. Cedar, steel, rain remembering how to be stone. He was alive. The hunt was over, or maybe it had just agreed to change its name. The old warehouse had a way of remembering the crimes it hosted. Nails wept rust down cinder block. The rafters hung like ribs over a stomach that had learned to keep secrets. The auctioneer, no mask tonight, only a suit that treated light like an accomplice, stood at the center of the floor with 4 men on his left, 4 on his right, and a smile that promised a future he didn't intend to live in himself. Kira ghosted us in through the loading bay, 2 rooms back, her voice small and precise in my ear. 2 thermal clusters at your 12. Cameras are blind. You have 5 minutes, maybe 4 if the generator sulks. Ryse's shoulder brushed mine as we stepped out of shadow and onto the painted concrete. He moved like his wound belonged to a different story. I let my breath fall into the rhythm of his. It steadied whether I wanted it to or not. The auctioneer noticed us and brightened the way a collector does when a lost piece walks home. Friends, he said, and his voice took the oxygen out of the room. I was just wondering when family might arrive. Funny, I said. I came to shut down a trafficking ring. I didn't expect a reunion. He spread his hands, each finger a column in an argument. Words like trafficking are so prosecutorial. We offer structure to chaos. A name is the first kindness. Ryse's head tilted. You sell the name, then take the person, he said, and it was the first time I'd heard a myth sound tired. Semantics, the auctioneer said cheerfully, and leverage. Which brings us to leverage. He looked past Ryse to me with interest that wasn't hunger so much as paperwork. You've been busy, Ghost. The leak that learned to swim. Nick, I said. Try using it. It won't make you human, but it'll help me pretend. He laughed as if I'd offered him dessert. Nick, then. You have something I want, a talent for survival, and something you will want by the time this is over. An exit that isn't a grave. He nodded toward Ryse without looking at him. Trade me the hunter. I can give you clean documents, a jurisdiction that has never heard your name, an empire of favors, freedom with teeth. I thought of the screens in the auction room, the bland cruelty of soft fonts spelling out a person's outline, of Jonah stirring soup so Ryse would remember to eat, of Kira riding a wiper that would erase a lab and then refusing to apologize for winning. I was untouchable, I said, and the words tasted like iron and a promise. Until I felt something flickered in his eyes, annoyance at the script change. I took a step forward, just one, because I wanted him to smell the decision. Pass, I said. The smile thinned. He sighed, a disappointed parent. You of all people should know what happens to those who refuse structure. They get good at running, I said, and better at choosing who they run with. He lifted 2 fingers. The men on his right drew weapons with the competence of people who think about range the way artists think about color. Kira's whisper slid into my ear. On my mark, we move. He's standing on an artery. Ryse's posture shifted, not bigger, not smaller, truer. Calm congealed around him like a weather pattern. He met the auctioneer's eyes and said, "I don't think you know how much of this room is already mine." "Always the mythology with your kind," the auctioneer said, bored. "No myth." Ryse's voice dropped a key. "Infrastructure." He reached under the catwalk rail and pulled a handle I hadn't seen because men like him are trained to know where buildings keep their secrets. The air system woke all at once. Fans deep in the walls thrummed. Vents in the ceiling sighed like a choir. The warehouse breathed in. "What?" one of the guards started. Kira answered for us, not with words but with a soft chime in my ear. "Suppressor flood engaged," she said. "They rigged the place to reset scent baseline after auctions. Congratulations, you're standing inside a lung." Cold vapor hissed down from the rafters, a pale mist that smelled like nothing, and the memory of rain. The auctioneer's smile didn't break, but the skin around his eyes remembered how to be human. "You won't help yourselves," he said. "You'll erase yourselves." "That's the point," Ryse said. He looked at me once, a clean look, no performance. "Stay behind me." I wanted to argue because ritual demanded it. I didn't, because survival has better rules. The mist thickened. Under it, a bass thud as the emergency generator kicked to rescue the system from our sabotage. Kira's voice went bright with focus. "Heads up, their backup power is a thrift store miracle. Overvoltage on a wet line. Ryse, your side?" He had already seen it. He moved in 3 clean steps to the breaker panel stacked beside an auxiliary compressor, popped the casing with a twist of a knife, and yanked a bus bar free like a rotten tooth. Sparks went white and mean. Electricity licked the metal and jumped to mist. "Now," Kira said. Everything happened at once. The flood turned volatile. The compressor screamed. The auctioneer shouted something that sounded less like order and more like prayer. Ryse drove me sideways. I took Kira's mark and threw a flash charge low. Sound compacted into a white kernel. Heat stood up. The explosion wasn't cinematic. It was a body blow delivered by a giant who didn't care about our angles. Light hammered the room. The mist became a wall of heat. The guards went down, some on purpose, some because physics didn't care about pay grades. The auctioneer disappeared behind a curtain of fire that wrote a fast sentence no one would read. We hit the deck. The shock wave rolled over us and kept going, looking for other gods to bother. "Up," Kira coughed in my ear. "Secondary blast in 30, exit route 3. Move your feet, heroes." The world had turned to smoke and emergency lights. I found Ryse by the feel of him, the discipline of his shoulders, the precise way he made space for me while taking none from Kira. We pushed into a corridor that wasn't a corridor until our bodies made it one. Behind us, flames licked a stack of crates and learned our names. The air filled with alarms arguing about whose job this was. Somewhere a sprinkler tried to atone and failed. We reached a service door, and the universe finally agreed to open something. The night outside took us in with wet hands. Kira slammed the door and jammed the latch with a bolt she pulled from nowhere. 10 seconds, she said, not checking the math because she'd already done it. Ryse leaned on the wall and let himself breathe like a man who'd been promised another minute. Blood darkened the bandage under his shirt again, but slower now. I wanted to touch his shoulder and didn't, because I am learning. "Wait," I said, and doubled back 2 steps into the heat. I found a splinter of blown metal, dragged it across the concrete in a thin curve that wavered because my hand wasn't steady, and made a mark that looked like a thread starting and deciding it had somewhere else to be. Kira grabbed my collar and hauled me backward with an affection that could lift cars. Exit now, poetry later. We ran. Around the corner, down the dock, across a smear of puddles reflecting a sky that didn't care what we called this. Behind us, a deeper thud rolled the warehouse's bones and pushed a gout of fire into the night like a dragon remembering its youth. We stopped 2 blocks out where the street bent to pretend it had a view. Sirens were choosing routes. A couple in a window argued about soup. Life insisted. Kira pressed something into my hand, a small charred badge she'd lifted from a dead guard, already wrapped in plastic. "For the book," she said. "And for the theater." "Theater?" I asked. "Bodies," she said, looking back toward the glow. Wrong dental. Right story. Tonight the hunter and the leak went down with the lab. Ryse's mouth shaped the ghost of a laugh. You always wanted a martyrdom. I want plausible paperwork, Kira said. Martyrdom, just photographs better. He reached into his pocket and produced a second clan token, the twin, of the one I'd left on his table, and closed my fingers over it. In case you still believe in symbols. I believe in exits, I said. Same faith, he said. We stood and watched the warehouse burn. Through the open bay door I could see the floor a moment at a time between gusts of smoke, black, slick, lit by devil red. The line I'd drawn near the threshold caught flame, flared, guttered, became a smear, and then a memory. A red trace. Fading. Who hunts whom? Kira asked, not expecting an answer. No one, I said. Not tonight. Tomorrow? Ryse asked. We'll rename it, I said. Hunting sounds like losing. He nodded once, as if I'd confirmed an equation he'd been working alone in the dark. We turned away from the fire together, 3 shadows peeling from a brighter one, and let the smoke write the ending for anyone who needed it. Behind us, the warehouse settled into itself with the satisfaction of a story that finally learned how to end. By burning down the room where it was told, the sea made a sound like breathing, slow and certain. Morning light spilled across the cafe windows, turning the glass into soft gold. Outside, gulls circled over the docks. Inside, the smell of roasted beans filled the air with the promise of normal things that didn't explode or bleed. I sat near the window, the ocean stretching out beyond it like an unfinished sentence. My laptop hummed quietly. On the screen, Department of Civil Registry, Division for the Unmarked. My name, Eli Ward, today's edition, sat on the header of a report about illegal scent suppressor distribution. I typed slowly, carefully, the way you write when you no longer want to leave fingerprints. Every so often, a wave hit the pier and shook the light just enough to remind me it was real. The cafe's radio murmured headlines between songs, the usual politics, weather, then, and in local news, the case involving unauthorized trafficking of scent profiles and unmarked citizens has been officially closed. Authorities confirmed that the primary suspects perished in a laboratory explosion 6 weeks ago. I smiled before I meant to. Kira would call that my worst tell. Somewhere she was probably sitting in another city, cursing at a code compiler and swearing at her coffee machine. The thought made the world feel less temporary. The waiter brought my refill, a small ceramic cup, dark liquid swirling with heat, and set it down with a practiced smile. Thanks, I said. He nodded and left. And then, still not great at hiding your scent, detective. The voice came from behind me, smooth, low and threaded with that impossible calm that made air forget how to behave. For a second, my pulse stopped pretending to be civilized. I turned. Ryse stood by the counter, hands in the pockets of a weather-worn jacket, the kind of thing that belonged to travelers or ghosts. His hair was longer, his scars quieter, but the eyes, those gray storm-steadfast eyes, hadn't changed at all. You're supposed to be dead, I said. He shrugged. You're supposed to be retired. Touché. He came closer, every step measured like he was testing gravity. No scent suppressors now, the air filled with that memory of cedar and rain that had once meant danger and now just meant him. I leaned back in my chair and gestured to the empty seat. You planning to haunt me or join me? He sat. Little of both. We let silence settle for a moment, the kind of quiet that doesn't need explaining. Outside, the horizon brightened, the sun lifting itself out of the sea like it still believed in second chances. So what now? I asked finally. You my handler? My ghost? My very persistent allergy? He smirked, faintly. Just a man who finally found his trail. After all this time, he tilted his head. After all this time, you stopped running fast enough for me to catch up. I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in weeks. It startled a few people nearby, which somehow made it better. The waiter passed again, refilling our cups like it was any other morning. Like the world hadn't tried to end itself on fire and secrets. I wrapped my hands around the cup. The ceramic was warm. The smell of coffee was stronger than the sea, almost enough to drown the adrenaline ghost still clinging to my nerves. You know, I said, I used to think the hunt was everything. The chase, the fear, the puzzle. but maybe it's just proof you're still alive." Ryse looked at me over the rim of his cup, his mouth curving in that quiet way he had, half amusement, half truth. Then he said, "We must be very much alive." Outside, the wind shifted. The sea breathed again. The smell of salt and coffee mingled in the air, and for the first time in a long time, it didn't mean danger. It just meant morning,